Greetings, you've landed at the VUC, IP Communications and VoIP Community. We would like to thank Simwood.com for their support. Simwood can turn you as a developer into a telco. Our hosted PBX is from onsip.com, and you can go to getonsip.com for a URL people can click to call you. We've been privileged over the last 5 years to be using the best conference bridge on the planet. Yes, I'm talking about zipdx.com, full color, full featured, full HD conference bridge. Our website, vuc.me on the webs, hosted by bluehost.com. And our worldwide local rate dial-ins are from voxbone.com. All right. Thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody on Periscope and on YouTube to VUC 616 for October 21st, 2016. I always say 2016, but I keep hearing people going 2016. And Michael is still the focus. Okay. We're hoping to have James Bodie, who purchased at least one and is probably planning on buying the carton of 6 Amazon Dots. And all I had to say for that was, that's good. I don't know why he's doing these things, but he is. We also have a hobbyist / researcher with us, Michael Graves, who's going to talk about his experiences. And we're testing a whole bunch of things. We're testing Periscope. Oh, you know what? Speaking of Periscope, here is the Hangout. So we're looking at our YouTube feed now on Periscope for the 4 people who are watching there, which is 2 more than those watching on YouTube Live. This is so much fun. You know, when I used to, when I was a ham and I was like 16 years old, I dreamed of doing video. And who knew that a half a century later, this is the flying car of amateur radio. We're broadcasting on 2 separate channels, and possibly somebody will tune in our drive time. Anyway, I would like to, Tim, I wanted to ask you a question, and before I forget it, because at my age that happens all the time. Michael and I were talking before you got here about the different protocols and systems for light bulbs and yada, yada. He mentioned Digby, which I've heard of, and there are several others. And I think I heard you and Jason at some point also discussing the merits of various systems. And I wanted to ask you specifically, so you've got a piece of hardware, like the dumbest thing possible is a light bulb, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, turn on, turn off. The light bulb can't even tell you when it's going to burn out or anything. So can you compare a little bit the needs of hardware, first of all? I mean, obviously.
So light bulbs are a special case, right? Because they're always plugged in. And if you can afford to use a relatively, you know, if you're burning a quarter of a watt for the CPU and the radio on your light bulb, because it's plugged into the mains, it doesn't matter. So that's a little different from some of the, like the dumbest possible devices are things which actually don't have any external power supply and that you want to run off batteries. Those are the really interesting cases. You think about, you know, maybe a soil moisture meter that you want to sit in the ground for a year, and you probably only want one reading a month or a day, let's say, off it. Those sorts of things, those are probably the dumbest ones and actually the most difficult, because you need, or the extreme one, which somebody mentioned to me, was something. Now, what kind of sensor was it? It was a stress sensor that you want to mount on a steel beam in a huge building. You want to install it in the drywall, and you never want to touch it again until the building comes down.
You mean like a 2001 situation?
Oh, well,
so short of nuclear batteries, you need, well, even if you had a nuclear battery, you need something very low power.
Or solar or wind.
Well, but these ones, I mean, the crop ones, you can use solar, and people do that because, like, if you don't get any solar, your crops are dead anyway. So that's kind of by the by to some extent. But the ones that you install in the drywall, it's like, what do you do? And the talk now is trying to power them off stray RF signals. So they just sit there and pick up a little bit of loose Wi-Fi and suck that down to charge up the battery. And basically it only works if you have a duty cycle, which is like, you spend 12 hours charging up what is effectively quite a lot, a capacitor with this stray RF, and then at the end of that, you've got enough power to fire up the CPU and send your 48 bits of data that you want to send out over the radio, and then you shut down again, and then a day later you do the same thing. So that's kind of the real bottom end of the thing. And then the top end, you're starting to look at things like garage doors or fridges, which have, multiple data sources, multiple data sinks potentially, and permanent powered, and are probably within Wi-Fi range or something. And then that's the other end, where you're using something like Wi-Fi for short range and permanent connectivity to your Wi-Fi. And that's the sort of the other edge. And then there's a whole bunch of solutions in the middle about radio, and our friends in the telcos are desperately trying to get into that space. Although, as I was arguing with James the other week, I'm unconvinced about the way that they're doing that. But we'll see how that will play out.
Let me zoom back for a second, because that's only part of the question. And all right, so we can divide these devices into whether they're powered all the time or not, and a lot of home devices would be powered on all the time. But my question also was with regard to the kinds of hardware. So power need is one of the factors, but what I didn't understand in my discussion with Michael was why they were using other radio. So you're talking to the hub, which is then talking on the Wi-Fi to over the network.
Well, like for these things, for example, this is a Belkin Wemo light bulb, which is an LED light bulb that has built into it. I believe there's Zigbee, but I could be wrong about that. They could be Z-Wave. They're one of the Z things anyway. And Z-Wave, like Zigbee, these are protocols that have come about, really over the past decade, specifically for home automation, and they've been extended to light industrial automation. I think that's quite a different thing from what people talk about when they talk about IoT and sensors, because I think sensors are implicitly more remote, maybe more distant, and so you end up with different kind of radio technologies involved, which is where the cellular carriers sort of get all wound up. Well, I could be wrong about that, Tim, but
I think there's a bunch of interesting crossovers. So, for example, your one of the strong points of, now which one is it? One of those Z things, and I've forgotten which one it is an auto meshing network. So if you for example had a bunch of fairy lights down your garden, then
right.
Each of them would mesh to the next one. So you could have a football pitch sized garden, and even if your Wi-Fi didn't get anywhere close to the edge, it wouldn't matter, because each light bulb would talk to the next one and pass the message around. And so again, if you're in a crop situation, you might have these crop sensors put 20 meters apart, but they were providing a mesh network between themselves, and then one of them has to connect to the outside world somewhere.
Yeah, and it doesn't do you a whole lot of good if you have that stress sensor, in the foundation of a bridge that is otherwise off in on a country lane.
Right. If it's, right. or I mean, the other classic instances, and the one that actually has been the biggest use of this kind of IoT, if you think of it as IoT, is things like Coke machines. So if you've got a lonely vending machine sitting in a bus station somewhere, and you want to know when it's out of, whatever your drink of choice is, then these things actually just phone up. They send an SMS or they phone up and they say, I'm out of whatever, and the delivery guy comes around and fills it up. And that's that thing. It hasn't got there's not another Coke machine for 5 miles maybe. So it's got no one else to talk to.
Now, speaking of this, Coke machines are interesting. ATMs are also interesting. There's an ATM at the corner store just that way, about 100 yards from here. And it's novel because it's got an Ethernet connection to the house. That much is plainly obvious. But it's also got a little cellular antenna on it. And it's like, one way or the other, it's going to phone home. And does that make that ATM an IoT? Yeah, I mean, are ATMs in the IoT universe? I suppose they are, but maybe they're at one end of it.
don't know. They're not something they let me play with. So I don't get my fingers on that stuff. I actually have never really looked at ATM technology. Last time I looked at it, it was still running OS2. So no, I haven't had a chance to look at ATMs. But yeah, and I mean, I guess what they do is a lot of these things, though, particularly if it's a relatively high value piece of equipment like an ATM, then the extra cost of whacking a cellular modem in there and paying the $1 a month to AT&T for it to be still the SIM to be live is probably worth it just for only having to maintain one equipment type. Like, even if you know it's going to be plugged into with Ethernet, like, why would you build two variants of the same model?
Right. Isn't there an issue, though? Because, I mean, I've had problems in years past with if you're not moving between cell sites, your phone would simply fall off the registration of the tower. Wouldn't you have problems like that, or would you be engineered around that if you had a fix like that?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I guess that that you have a thing which is capable of redialing, or whether you, I don't know, actually. James would be more of an expert on how do you keep a permanent connection to your cell tower if you're using it for data.
But he won't give me a straight answer on anything. So.
But he's here with us now.
He still may not give us a straight answer.
What do you want? What sort of answer do you want, Michael?
Well, we're sort of talking about ATMs, and there's an ATM nearby me that has a cellular modem built into it. It's connected to Ethernet to the building, but it's also got a cellular modem, which I presume it's a sort of a backup thing. But I've had problems in years past with a mobile phone not remaining registered with a tower if it doesn't move around, do something, engage the tower periodically. And every few days I would have to turn my phone off and on if I wasn't going somewhere, because incoming calls would bring straight to voicemail.
Well, it sounds like
how
badly configured. No, there should be a periodic refresh. It's a bit like a lease on an IP address from the DHCP server. So you register that you're there, and then you sit there and you shut up. But at the end of your attachment period, it's a bit like a SIP registration, isn't it? You have to re-register to prove that you're still there. And what it sounds like was happening in your case is that that re-registration was not happening within the correct time frame for whatever reason. It could be a configuration issue.
Okay, I mean, it was a classic problem, and I had it in various different parts of the country, always with T-Mobile, because I've been with them for a long time.
I was going to say there was a point when the carriers were worried about their data slots and idle phones that weren't using their GPRS connection would have it dropped because they didn't have enough data slots to go around, and they didn't like connections just being up and idle because it burned some resource somewhere. So I think, but I certainly with LTE, I imagine that's a thing of the past.
Sure.
With LTE, yes, but certainly not with GSM.
Certainly. So interesting stuff. Anyhow, the lesson that I have learned, and we won't go into this in great detail, we have this Wemo stuff. I've had this about a year and change. I bought it because it was inexpensive and I wanted to explore it a little bit. Product is actually pretty decent, but the software that drives it is desperately bad to the point of I wanted to put these in a bucket, pour some lighter fluid on them, melt them down. It was so frustrating. Then I had a little conversation with Stacey Higginbotham, and she convinced me to spend the money on the Philips Hue stuff. And the experience of that is, this is like a no-name brand PC, and that is like buying Apple. The experience was just brilliant. The software is great. The product is expensive, but it's worth it. What can you do?
Yeah. I'm curious to know whether it's possible to find like an open source or a third-party gateway that makes that. So I'm getting echo from somewhere. Gateway that makes that usable, or so whether it's the gateway software that's crap and the light bulbs are all right, or whether it's the software and the light bulbs that makes everything crap.
Well, I can shed you some insight on that, in that the little gateway thing, hang on. The little Wemo gateway thing is this. I can imagine it has less memory than a TI-99/4. I mean, it's ridiculous. However, once it's working, it's fine. It is the application software for the mobile devices that they are arbitrarily use as a remote control for the Wemo stuff that is bad. And the way to make Wemo work well, as we've discovered, is to make it work with your Amazon Echo or your other thing, or some other overarching control system, so you don't have to deal with the desperately bad Belkin stuff. And so my wife now comes home, and we don't use the Belkin gear for this, but she comes home, throws open the door, and says, "Alexa, turn on all the lights," and all the lights in the house come up.
Uh-oh. You
And
should,
she likes
you should have said that. I'm on loudspeaker.
Perfect demo.
Thank you for that.
See, that was exactly what I was saying, Randy.
Yeah. And there's what was it they were saying in the IoT podcast? She whose name must not be spoken.
Exactly.
The funny part is, we've only had this working for really a few weeks, and you get really accustomed to it. And so now my wife gets up in the morning, she walks over to where her computer is, and she says, she whose name must not be spoken, set the TV room lights to 35%. And behold, the lights ramp up to 35%. And that's just a little bit like walking around the enterprise. It's a simple thing, but it's a nice thing.
Okay, well, now that James is with us, he can explain the point of dot.
The point of dot? Well, it's a dot is just an echo, but without the speaker bits in there. It has a tiny little speaker, which is fine for engineering purposes, but in order to make it work properly, you have to plug it into some kind of external speakers or amplifier type device, which I just happen to have here in my kitchen. So the dot is the one for me. So, and it costs about 1/3 of the price. So it's about what, $49.99 as opposed to $149.99. And it's smaller, so you can hide it away too. So that is the point of the dot.
Wow.
They're going to sell lots and lots and lots of them, I think, because they're really good.
Like you, yes.
To people like me and Tim. Tim, have you got a dot yet?
No, I'm not in favor of spies in the camp.
Oh, look! No, I'm not going to do asterisk. I'm not going to have a dot. I'm going to make it all myself.
No. Well, maybe. No, I went through my talking to computers phase about 15 years ago, and I found it actually rather irritating.
Well,
I like it.
Well, it's not really
15
surprising.
years ago, it would have been.
Yeah, it was really crap in those days, but it's got a lot better.
I'm not sure it's about the recognition quality. It's about the relationship. Like, I don't actually, I trust neither Google nor Amazon with anything, frankly, apart from my money. Where's the legal contract that you have with Amazon about what they do with your data, James?
You know what? I don't care because I know that I'm going to have to give something in order to get something back. It's a trade-off. It's like kind of paying money. You don't like paying money to people in shops to get.
I'd actually much rather pay money and have it a really clear-cut deal than
it's like
this incremental theft of my privacy.
Like
well, that is your right, and I think we all respect that. But I think that the majority of people would be willing to accept swapping a little bit of their data in return for something that's really useful.
Let me just interject something. If those of you who use Google Voice, I know probably everyone here has an account, right? James, you probably have 8. I probably have 10. I don't know how many anybody else has. Michael, do you have a Google Voice account? I'm sure you have at least one, right?
Sure. Have I used it in this decade? No.
Well, it's very useful to those of us on this side of the Atlantic for calling the States and so on. But anyway, my point being that because they are honing their edge of speech recognition, is that the right word, actually? Yeah, speech to text. They're analyzing your messages, and they'd like you to say whether they're good or not, which for what I use that for, I don't mind that. So Google, of course, some of the messages, if I read them, were pretty funny, as far as, reminding me for the appointment for my cat to be spayed. Obviously a wrong number, but also the transcription was pretty hilarious too. But anyway, mostly it's spam calls, and they're pretty silly.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about that was that Google used that service and the 411 service as a way of seeding their recognition database, which I thought was very clever.
Sorry.
That's you, Bodie.
I'm sorry.
Everybody in the room.
Yeah. But they used it as a way of seeding their recognition database and avoiding, therefore, having to go for a more biological approach and therefore encroach on various people's patents on speech recognition. So that whole thing was a data grab in order to avoid having to pay for patents from certain relatively monopolistic companies whose names I will not mention.
Makes total sense. But that's a case of something where it was worth it. It's worth it to have that number. I call my brother. We don't talk about anything secret or that matters at all. In fact, most of the time we talk about TV shows at this point anyway. So unless the TV networks want to listen in and get that information, more power to them.
Although I see that now Google is pulling down the barrier that they had between, they used to not associate data they got in Gmail and Google Voice with data that they got from DoubleClick. Those two were separate containers, separate silos of data. They've now deleted that provision in your privacy agreement with them. So what you say in email will be given to DoubleClick.
I just had a flash, Tim. What if somebody wrote, you know how there's Google Alerts and there used to be maybe Yahoo, similar stuff. What if somebody wrote a thing that scoured the internet and gave you an alert and showed you the difference when a user agreement was changed? That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, you just have to follow Aryl's Twitter feed. He pretty much does that.
Okay.
With commentary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot of that going on.
By the way, Twitter feed, if anybody has ever used this service, we actually were using it because it's a thing that's like 10 years old at least. Well, maybe not 10. I don't know. It's so long. Twitter feed was something where you could program it to watch your feed, your RSS feed, which, VUC has an RSS feed, vuc.me/feed, I think it would be, and tweet when there was a new post on your blog. So that's what was auto-tweeting our, VUC 616 for such a date, and gave the headline. I just got a thing from them saying, as of October 31st, we're out of here.
Now, what was the company name?
I believe it's Twitter Feed, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go.
Because I used to use something called Tweet Later that became something else. They morphed into something else.
Let me just check. Yes, it is. It's Twitter Feed, twitterfeed.com. Attention, people of Earth. Twitter Feed will be shutting its doors like they had doors, right? On October 31st, please transition your account to another service. Before that date, we recommend Buffer or DLVR it. You know that one?
Deliver it.
Deliver it. Okay.
Deliver it.
However, there's a lot of there are many ways to do this. So
what they're saying there is that their money ran out, and they kind of failed to A, find somebody to buy them, or B, have a sustainable business model.
Absolutely. But what's interesting about that is that they never, they had like a 1995 website that never changed. They had a database and they had a cron job running, or however that's done on the web. But there were no ads. So I'm not quite sure what the business model was. Maybe it was a hobby thing or something. So that was unusual to get that. How many of you can raise your hands if you want, how many of you have received an email from somebody saying, hey, it's been a long time since you've logged in and you can't remember what the company even is? Got to be everybody, right?
All the time.
Every day almost, right?
Yeah.
Or also, alternatively, we're shutting our doors. I get a lot of stuff. Now, Twitter Feed I knew, although I haven't been back to their site for months, maybe years, but a lot of things I get saying we're that's it, we're done, sorry. I was a little surprised to see Blab disappear, but now there's Periscope producers, so maybe that kind of takes
Well,
up.
Blab said they disappeared. How to put it? They were doing an experiment. They learned what they were going to learn with it. It wasn't becoming a business. They've sort of gone back into hideaway mode to figure out how to turn what they learned into a business.
That's what I told all the girls in high school that turned me down, though. Yeah, I'm just doing some research, you know. That doesn't sound that convincing to me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Back to part 2 of my Carl Fife question to Tim. So why are there 50,000 protocols, different protocols, and what is the point? So you said the power thing. We never got past this. You say understand the power thing. I understand the timing, right? Because some stuff has to be polled, and other things have to be maybe every n times that. I don't know. First of all, are these things all polled, or are they some of them initiate the contact? How does that work on the?
Yeah, in general, so the lower power ones tend to have time slots, so they'll be on a timer that will wake themselves up every 4 hours, check whether they're empty or whatever, and send a report. So if you're looking at something like, and some of those time slots are actually enforced by the radio protocol. So if you look at some of the really super low bandwidth things like LoRa on the Things network, you actually get a time slot when you're supposed to speak. And there's a I've forgotten his name, but there's this thing that the hams use that's a super low bit rate, and you broadcast at 14 minutes past midnight. Like you get a localized time slot, and you listen at 15 minutes past midnight for the answer. So there's this super low bit rate thing, but I've forgotten quite what the advantages of this are, but basically you can get this huge distances over this network. I've forgotten what the thing's called. So that's kind of, again, one extreme, and it's about optimizing for. There are no good. There's no one good answer to this set of problems, and basically people are still playing with it. There's also the thing of the land grab of, like, there's this feeling that if we get this right, then we can win. And then the other thing that you have to bear in mind is that all of this is done in a very confined amount of spectrum. Like if you were an alien and you were designing this for your own benefit, then you'd use spectrum that was suitable. But actually, there's so little spectrum that you can get hold of that you don't have to pay a $1 billion license for, or multi-billion-dollar license for. That it's all crammed into some little slots around the Wi-Fi space, and then the ISM experimental and various other bits and pieces of tiny slices of the spectrum that can be freely used without an expensive license. And so there's a lot of the engineering is going on in that space. And one of the things that's driving that is the ability to do software-defined radios, so that you don't actually, you don't have to physically wind the coil that will receive on this frequency and this frequency only, and you don't have to build a PLL oscillator with a precisely tuned capacitor that will do that frequency and then decode it with some kind of physical construct. You can define the radio protocol in terms of just software or something you run on an FPGA, and the only thing you have to do is kind of things like impedance match the antenna and get the antenna roughly right. Otherwise, you won't get any signal. But
specific question here: stuff that is connected to the power line, such as a light bulb, my first dumb example. It's cheaper to use radio than to use something that goes over the. After all, it is on the power line already. So, why is it difficult to detect a signal on the power line, or doesn't that work well?
We actually used to have, we had a participant. He hasn't been here for a couple of years, but he worked for a utility in Tennessee, And they had been down this path before. You remember there was an effort at one point to have the power utilities actually be ISPs and deliver bandwidth over the transmission lines. And I remember having a conversation with him, and his fundamental disagreement with this was they put tremendous amount of effort into keeping those transmission lines free of extraneous high frequency content, things that might damage their equipment. And so you have this transmission system that's basically designed to thwart you in your attempt to run high frequency information up and down it. And it's terribly noisy as well. It's just, you can't ensure signal integrity over that system. So he said it was doomed to failure, and so it has. And even the X10 stuff, which people used for home automation. Oh, hang on, I have my camera going.
Know that we can't see you, right?
Yeah, the X10 stuff, which people used for light bulbs and light switches and appliances and stuff, that stuff suffered all kinds of problems of not being able to reliably send signaling across the power lines, the neutrals and whatnot. And if you had, you could have a controller and a controlled thing and have them on different phases of the power, and the signals wouldn't pass, and you had to refit your breaker panel to allow the high frequency signals across the two phases. And it was, I think the word is PETA. On the other hand, you have Ethernet over power kits that do work.
I use those all the time. I'm actually connected using one now rather than run a cable through the wall. And the wireless in here is terrible. And I don't really want another access point in here. And I still have the problem with feeding it with a cable, so I'm using it over the power line. And it works pretty well. And multiple different connectors around the house allow for cable connections over the power line.
Yeah.
You have a couple of amusing privacy problems there. Not that, it's probably not an issue, but so it turns out that you don't necessarily have that phase to yourself. You and your neighbors are probably on the same phase, and so there's a fair chance that unless you enable the encryption in that device, Andy, then your neighbors could join your Wi-Fi, your network, pretty easily.
I think it's plausible that they could. I don't think that they are on the same phase, though. I mean, my garage is on a different phase.
Okay, well, but so that's certainly in blocks of flats and things. That's an amusing risk. And then the other one, which I hadn't really thought about until it was pointed out to me, is that you're depending on the frequency, you've got one heck of an antenna sitting there. So you're running this thing at how many megahertz it is, and then you've got a house full of wire, basically unshielded. I mean, in terms of radio, unshielded wire running around the house. So you're broadcasting this stuff in a way that you kind of with a much bigger antenna than you're doing on Wi-Fi. So I mean, I'm not sure how much that's actually a serious issue, but it's kind of amusing.
Here's a very serious issue if you live next door to a ham radio operator who likes to operate on HF, because these power line broadband things are wideband noise generators on the HF bands. Really, really bad news if you're into HF. That is.
Well, and bear in mind that all of those things apply to that internet access over transmission line stuff as well. That if you're near somebody who's a shortwave operator, they are inducing all kinds of crud into that transmission circumstance, and it's just weird.
Well, and I mean, I think even worse in the transmission line situation, you've got transformers, sitting at the substations, which are precisely tuned to get 60 hertz through or 50 hertz, depending on your nationality, and nothing else. And unless you're quite lucky, they very effectively block that. So then you have to have some kind of bypass which will extract the signal from one side of the transformer and re-inject it on the other. And that gives you a potential breach in isolation. That you put the transformer in to isolate the two sides and to obviously step up or down the voltage. But now you're breaching the isolation just so some clown can run an internet connection over it. Well,
There's a technical term for that, right? It's called fugly.
Yes, indeed.
So with the home automation things, when we're talking about Zigbee or Z-Wave or whatever protocol we're talking about, do these run on 433 and 668 megs?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And there's some in the 2.4 as well.
Okay, well, the ones that are down at low frequencies are going to have quite a long transmission range. Certainly, I used to have a light switch, so you could switch the light on and off 100 meters away down the road, which is not particularly brilliant, particularly if you're in a dense environment and many of your neighbors have also gone for home automation. Do we have problems with crosstalk with this stuff?
In theory, they're like key fobs for cars. In theory, they have they're paired. You have keys, and you have to do an introduction thing of. Presumably, when you had to do this, Michael, you had to somehow introduce into the network those WeMos.
Yeah, they basically all have what you would consider the equivalent of a MAC address. They have a serial number. You have to put whatever their little interface device is, or it could be a third-party thing, like the Echo. You have to put it into a sort of a hunting mode, and then it will go out and find these things, and you register them with your install, and then they become linked up.
So you could speculatively, like if you knew your neighbor was about to install home automation, you could speculatively run write a script that just waited for them to appear and then grab them as they appear.
Yeah, because when they power on, generally they broadcast themselves with some default params, and so you could hunt for that, and then away you go. This is unusual, but for the first time in like my history, I'm the one prepared to do a dangerous demo.
No Cylon until now.
No Cylon. Yeah, maybe we fixed that. Good,
wouldn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, two things. We are going to have on the 4th of November. We are going to have Yonomi. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Yonomi. Yonomi. They make an app for iOS and Android, and the app is in and of itself. I think of it as a replacement for If This Then That. And the value of it is that, first of all, it looks like this. You can't really see, of course, but it looks like this. It's got an array of light bulbs. There, if I turn it just the right way, you can see it's got an array of different things it can control. Where If This Then That is much too literal. Literally,
it's on or off, isn't it?
Yeah, if it gets dark, turn on the light, with no other conditionals or intelligence possible. Yonomi is a little more intelligent than that, in that it's, if the light sensor says it's dark and it's between these hours and it's Monday to Friday and this other thing's not going, you can then have an action, which is more useful. The other thing is that it is an app that runs locally on your device, and it uses some remote server to establish connections to things, but it doesn't. It runs remotely, or it runs locally. So, for example, I am about to turn over here, turn on all the lights in my office. You'll see the lights over my shoulder just turned on, and that was the Yonomi app on my tablet. Basically sending a command through the Belkin Wemo controller locally. There was no internet action involved in that. And that's the one thing I like about it as opposed to IFT, is that it's entirely locally contained. They're a relatively young company. They're less than a year old, and we'll have their CEO in 2 weeks. Lights off. The other thing, though, so that was just the Belkin stuff because that's all I use in the office here. I demoted the Belkin stuff to the office. There are 3 of the Philips Hue lights back there on my bench, and they are in fact programmed to be used for Halloween in the front yard. And they're being controlled by a little app that is called Hue Halloween. And I'm going to have to turn my audio up here. I'm going to turn them off, bring up the Hue Halloween app, and let you see what this does.
So how are you going to get the audio outside? Are you going to go speaker or something?
I have a substantial amount of audio equipment. Yes.
He has a 1 megawatt sound system out in the front lawn.
Ah!
That's enough of that now, and it will do an autoplay, and it will go through about a 20-minute loop with different effects.
Your neighbours are just going to love that, aren't they?
So can you trigger that when somebody walks near? It's like have it totally silent, and then as they approach, it leaps out at them.
The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's not as easy as it should be, and I'm going to turn that off now.
Thank goodness.
It's not as easy as it should be, and as near as I can tell, these things are driven by somebody needed something in the manner that I would need it, and that it's cute and it met their need, and now they're selling the app for $2. And at $2, it's a good value if you already have the multicolor lights. The problem is, I don't think there are that many people around who have 6 or 12 light bulbs and then want to choreograph. I think the value of this app is that it's automatic. And if you want something to happen more directly, it really needs to be outside of this, and you want to have a little something else that goes on. But on the other hand, someone like yourself, Tim, you could do this. You would do it. It would take you, an afternoon, right?
Yeah. Well, look, that's the moral equivalent.
Exactly.
Although I haven't done kind of any music for that. Although there was talk of it at one point. I quite like it being quiet, actually.
Yeah, and we'll only use the sound during Halloween, and it's about 1,200 watts of PA that we have to back up Halloween. So
yeah, that will be popular with the neighbours, won't it?
Well, we've done this. This is our 10th year of doing this. So
people who are going to be bothered by it have already moved out.
Pretty much. But it's the perfect IoT kind of thing, right? And one thing that I've been meaning to do for a long time is get away from incandescent lights. And so this is really the first year that we'll be using, not exclusively, but we're using a lot more LEDs now.
Well, isn't that a bit of an expensive thing to put out, on your lawn? I mean, they're like $50 each, aren't they?
Yeah, the danger
for those
some
things,
criminal will come in and steal them.
Well, for those things, though, those things will go out the day of Halloween. By the way those are going to be done, we only have 6 of the colored bulbs, and they will be basically, because I looked at them, and we used to have some floodlights. I should look at a photo for you. We used to have some floodlights that illuminated the entire scene, which is also filled with fog, right? And so you have this foggy kind of moving scene going on with orange floodlights through it. These things are not suitable to replace the floodlights, so I have some little LED floods, but they will be dimmer and they are controllable, where the other floods weren't. The light bulbs, those light bulbs will be inside the big carved pumpkins. So they are sort of more incidental points of light through the yard in the fog, not the entire field.
So the floodlights, how are they controlled?
The floodlights are no. The floodlights are these cheesy little LED floods that come with these little IR controllers. And I'm not planning on animating them in any way. They're just going to establish a baseline of light so that it's not dark. My wife is concerned that it'll be too dark. And I'm concerned that I want the eye to be drawn where I want it drawn. So I want it to be adequately dark that the highlights show up.
Yes.
Okay.
Our goal in this, we have a metric for this, by the way. We expect 1 or 2 children in the age range of 3.5 to 4 to decide that it's not worth the candy. we get 1 or 2 kids that run away screaming, and that's fine because we'll have 600 kids.
Wow.
Yeah, all that effort just to scare away 1 or 2 kids. It's awesome. It's wonderfully American, North American. It doesn't really happen over here, or does it happen up in Manchester?
There you go. There's some scene, part of the scene from last year.
Is that you on the left?
No, that's my brother-in-law and my niece.
Crikey, they are scary.
Yeah, and that was not with a lot of fog going on. If you're looking through the fence, the fog, looks kind of. We had a good pumpkin last year, though. The pumpkin was very good last year. It was.
And
We acquired our
do you
great
do
and scary
this?
pumpkin.
Or all this is the Memsab who does this for you? Oh, look at those legs.
Yeah, they're cute, aren't they? The wife does the carving of the pumpkins. That's kind of her thing. Not much fog in that shot. And give you from across the street, it looks about like that. So anyway, she does a lot of the inside of the house and whatnot, and some of the creative direction with me. I do the lighting and the sound and the fog effects, and then she carves the pumpkins. We have 2 pumpkins this year that are 120 pounds apiece. Those will be sort of the centerpieces.
You really do go to town on this, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, our whole neighborhood does Christmas up really big. They have a great big neighborhood festival, but and we were joking with neighbors who just moved in. Well, we're just your friendly neighborhood pagans, nothing to worry about. And you should have seen them start turning colors. It was really funny. I have to remind people, don't take me too seriously. It's just not worth the worry.
It does ask the question, where did it all come from? Well, why? Because Halloween is not anything, is it? It's just
No, it comes from ham radio.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, every culture's got a different point of origin, right? But in the Mexican culture, it's the Dia de los Muertos, which is the Day of the Dead, and
Which
it
is
has
coming
a
up soon,
huge.
right?
Well, it's there's 2. One is the 31st, and the other is November 1st. One is for the adults, and the other is for the children.
Right.
Slightly different versions.
I know. I suppose we have Bonfire Night, Guy Fawkes Night, where the children dress up an effigy of a poor Roman Catholic plotter who tried to and failed to blow up Parliament. And ever since then, on November the 5th, we burn effigies of poor old Guy Fawkes on a bonfire and shoots off lots of fireworks, which is really quite bizarre, isn't it? But almost as bizarre as Halloween.
So, for example, inside this great pumpkin, there'll be a color changing light. So where in the past we've had orange compact fluorescence, this year, where the orange compact fluorescence had occurred before, we'll be using the color changing animated lights. That it ties the sound into the lights nicely.
Yeah, it's a combination of the sound and the lights coordinated that makes it so much better.
Yeah, and I haven't found it yet, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to I have a Bluetooth receiver. I'm going to use the Bluetooth on the tablet to take the audio from the tablet out to the little mixer, so that somebody will be on the porch or they'll be able to manually drive the lights and the sound as necessary without being tethered to something, to wire.
So evil laughs are on the cards then?
They could be. I haven't so far issued somebody a lavalier. I have somebody in mind for that, but the problem is the wives get very nervous about us freaking kids out.
Have you considered the taking the Dan Jenkins approach and getting one of those MIDI pads with like multiple buttons, and then associating them with like rabid screams or distant chuckles and this kind of stuff, and then you could actually script the whole, direct the whole thing from your porch, just like cue the things.
Here's
off.
the problem. The problem with that is I love the idea of it. I have had a multi-channel lighting controller for 10 years, and I've only used it twice because it's too darn much work in advance to sit down and script all the stuff out and do the choreography. And whereas the nice thing about this is that it's automatic, more or less.
Right. No, I was thinking the other way. It was like you treat it like a musical instrument and you play it as, you select what feels like the right moment, and you push the button and somebody screams and something else falls off, or whatever. That was the essence of Dan's Dangerous demo, wasn't it, James?
It was, and it was a very good one. It was quite Tim-esque, I have to say.
We're moving in that direction, but now which Dangerous demo was that? Was that at Free Switch? Or
no, that was Astricon. That was the Astricon.
Okay.
He won the most entertaining one, as Tim wasn't there. as he's turned his back on Asterisk.
Hey, speaking of entertaining, how come you guys didn't go to IIT this year? That happened this week.
I was sorely tempted. That was something I was very close to going to, but this week got super busy and I just couldn't justify it.
Yeah. We went last year.
It's a good and it's an IoT conference, so I mean I could have justified it from that point of view. Well, it's a half IoT conference, and but I just like this week was
so there. Put that in
busy.
your pipe and smoke it.
Double IT, yes. No, interesting conference, interesting bunch of people. I had a few tweet battles with people about it on the fly, but yeah, no. So
that's most unlike you, Tim, to have a tweet battle with some people, isn't it?
No, it's quite. I'm most recent. Do you know this story about? I was at one of the WebRTC conferences, and I was asked to do a piece on standards. And the moderator was a little bit odd with me when I went in. So I was thinking, oh well. So I gave this very sensible talk about standards and came out. And he said he came out, and the moderator said that was pretty good. It's uncharacteristically restrained for you. And I was thinking, well, I'm not actually, in real life, I'm not anything like as or maybe I am. Who knows? Anyway, so he was like, he was surprised that I'd been well behaved and hadn't been rude to people. But I'm not sure my Twitter persona is quite that vicious. But anyway,
well, I have memories of you going for Phil Zimmerman at a ClueCon.
Oh, well, they needed going for.
Well,
I mean, anyone who thinks the correct solution to security is to read hex digits to each other over the phone it needs a wake-up call.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and they don't live in the same world that I do.
Well, the point I had with Phil is that there we are, we're sitting in front of, a 4K screen with high-quality audio and a keyboard. And the best we can do for exchanging keys is to, oh look, phone call. I'll be gone.
That's not me this time.
That sounds like
Red
a trend.
is ringing.
It is.
I'm given to understand we have 4 minutes now, and then something happens. Sorry, you had to watch the presidential.
All right, James. What's the TLDR summary of DOT?
Well, I've given it to you. It's pretty damn good. Buy them now.
But
no, we want to do a dangerous demo simultaneously working an Echo, Andy's Echo, my Dot, and you've still got the Treebee.
Yeah.
And Tim, so he can play, he can put Amazon Voice Services on a Raspberry Pi or even something else if he wants.
Of course.
And
like Pi.
So this morning,
I'll have a dot back here because I don't need the echo. I don't need the speakers because I have built-in audio back here.
Yeah,
so that's
same here. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So all those people who've got lots of audio sort of stuck in the ceilings and things like that, it's the ideal bit of kit.
And at $50,
yeah, almost disposable.
Most of the smarts without being expensive, right?
No, but that's 2 Kiva loans, unfortunately. So
2 what?
Kiva loans, $50, 25 each.
Well, I'll do both.
Now, by the way, have you guys been? Hope you don't have a bunch of money in Kiva that you have not loaned out. That would,
no, I loaned mine out about a month ago.
Good for you. But
back
once it comes back, you got to either take it or.
So I seem to be specializing in female groups who specialize in doing things with toilets for some reason. I don't know.
My advice is female groups because they're the best. They're the best at paying back.
That's what I found. Yes.
And agriculture is my thing. Is mostly agriculture. I mean, I'm not that into people selling makeup and stuff. I know that's great. That's fine. But raising food is, to me, would be one of the really specific things that I look for and support.
Yeah.
That would be kiva.org. I didn't prepare any text for this, so kiva.org. But for the huge number of people who are following us on.
If Michael's still there,
yes.
Could we just run over the name of that replacement service for if that this and that, because I kind of missed it again.
It's Yonomi, which is YONOMI.
YONOMI.
O
O
M I,
M I. Okay, that one.
and the URL is .co. And yeah, they just before we got live on this call, their PR person confirmed for the 4th. So
Did you put that in
And
the
now-
calendar or not yet?
I have not yet. No, I've been using it for 2 or 3 weeks because IFT. I mean, IFT is nice, but it's just so simple, and you want to do more evolved things than that. And what I was kind of avoiding diving into OctoBlue, which is the other end of it, right? OctoBlue is a little more evolved yet. I was trying to see.
Yeah,
if
it
there's
certainly
something
is. I mean, I had a look at OctoBlue, and it has Chris's eccentricities built into it. I think it is not easy to come to grips with.
We should have tried to grab him today. I didn't think of it because we were.
In fact, what you want to do for Yonomi is you don't want to go to the URL. You just want to look at it in the Play Store because it's an app.
Right. And for iOS as well, is it, or is it just Android?
Yeah. No, both.
Looking now.
And it's been pretty robust. I've actually had a few comments that I've went back to them and offered some things. For example, in the case of this Belkin stuff, if it's locally controlled device, you have to be on your local network to control it. So if I have it on my phone and I turn off the Wi-Fi when I'm home, it no longer works. It's got to be on the local subnet.
That's true of Netflix and a lot of other things too, though, of course, because they're talking to the network.
Right. Well, and what I said though is, I was away and I wanted to jerk with somebody who was at home, and I wanted to flash the lights on them, this sort of thing, and I VPN connected back to my house. Yeah, that's them.
Yeah, you can do that, sure.
I connected back to the house, but it still didn't work.
Ah, well, I just installed an app called Samsung Printer, I think it's called, whatever. Anyway, because we happen to have a Samsung printer, and they make an app for iOS and for Android that allows you to print from your phone. But of course, and it's interesting because they turn on the Wi-Fi if it isn't on. Because I know
they sold their printer business recently.
Not surprised. I don't unless I get my rants on Samsung printers. But the point is, anyway, that's what we have, and that's what works. But the app does work, and it's very nice. Hey, you know what? We're on the hour here, and I don't know what time we started, but we're going to kill.
Does that mean that Periscope submerges?
No, it's YouTube that submerges, but we can stay on Periscope. I'm curious to see how long it'll stay on.
Okay.
Have I been looking at Periscope? I had Periscope up at one point.
Hopefully Andy's been looking at it. I have.
Yeah, well, I had it because I clicked on the link first.
And I have it live in front of me right now. If I can get it to focus, there it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still working fine.
It seems
the one thing, James, about that Yonomi stuff, they control a dizzying array of devices. They really do, and you can,
including your LIFX light bulbs.
Well, I don't have LIFX. I have the Hue, but they control like 80 different types of devices.
And that, Michael, is November 4th, right? Which is 2 weeks from today. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you're not going to be doing this next week, by the way, right?
No, the 28th, I'll be out.
All right, so next week, it's October 28th. It's the Michael Graves roast without Michael. Okay, fine. Perfect. Anyway, with that, I think we will stop the broadcast for the moment, unless anybody else has any shocking news of any kind. Anything interesting? Anyone? Oh, Tim is back. No, nothing. All right. Good night, Mrs. Allenby, or whatever, however that goes, and we will see you all later. If you're really jonesing for the VUC, go to the @VoIP users Periscope feed, because we're going to keep this going and see if we can burn it out or not. Okay? See you next week, otherwise.